morning. It's good to thank you for joining us this morning. If you're either on Facebook or here this morning with us as we worship the Lord, we're glad that you're here. We're thankful. We just pray that this would be a blessing to you. So we have a sermon series called Living Like Jesus or Live Like Jesus, and we all love the idea, but when you actually try to live that out, it's a lot more than really we can do by ourselves without it. And so today we are going to talk about the do-gooder. Remember in school when we had the kid that we called them do-gooder or the teacher's pet? There's the one that's always getting away. And usually, at least from my perspective, was that kid that did those things so that they would get attention, but then would be protected by the teacher, but then would be terrible to everybody while they, got away with it, right? At least from our perspective, because obviously I probably wasn't the do-gooder. But anyway, and so when we look at today, though, we really get that from the text in Luke chapter 6, where Jesus says to love others and do good. And we're like, okay, so that's not hard. But then he adds that part, love your enemies and do good those that hate you. Now that's a whole nother thing, and that's where we get the idea. My mother-in-law was traveling to come visit us, and she was supposed to come to Memphis as a kind of a transition flight, and then we would go to Little Rock. We were going to pick her up in Memphis and then drive to Texarkana. And so we're like, hey, just skip that last little flight. Well, she had asked somebody if she can do that. It's always better to ask for forgiveness than permission. And so the lady said, you can't do that. And my question is, why can't you do that? Like, you can't control her, Well, anyway, so she ended up flying to Little Rock where we had to come pick her up. And the whole time I was just like, singing her praise. No, I was irritated. And then I gave her the nickname as a do-gooder because she always has to go by the rules. And so obviously you can see I usually kind of have a negative idea when we think of good do-gooder. But the truth is we need to be doing good. And God gives us that, and Jesus really gives us an outline of that. And so in Luke 6, he says in verse 27, he says, but to you who are listening, I say, love your enemies, do good to those that hate you, bless those who curse you, and pray for those who mistreat you. So we are to take on, if we are to really live out the faith that God's given us, and I believe if in ever a time, I believe we need, as Christians, to live this out. Like, if there's ever a season, since I've been in ministry, that we as Christians can now no longer live on the fence, we have an opportunity to show what it means to follow Christ. You can no longer hide behind attendance, like you either are in or not. And so that's good, but that's also, that you're also taking a stand. And so verse 33 of chapter 6 says this, he says, and if you do good to those that are good to you, what credit is it for you? Right? What credit is it for you? Because even sinners do that. So a lot of times, most of our goodness to other people is because they're good to us, right? So Christmas comes along, they give you a present, and you're like, oh, great, I'll buy you a present, right? So because they gave you a present, they pay for your lunch, you're like, well, I better pay for their lunch, I don't want to take it for granted. And so we do good based on people's good. And Jesus says, hey, that's great, but everybody does that. Even sinners do that. Even terrible people do that. I'm sure there's somebody that's that's the worst person ever that's doing something good because somebody else did good to them. I'm sure that's very common. So so we are to go beyond that and live like Jesus. We're to do good to those that hate you. Now, I'm going to share a story here in a little bit about that and the struggle that is, but we want to understand, where does this idea of doing good, like, what does it mean? And I really want to bring this to a practical, everyday living, and I think you'll see that through the sermon. It's not one of these things you can be like, oh, it was such a, he was so eloquent and as he said it. No, there's practical ways that you can live and do good in your family, where you work, where you serve. You can do good. Like, there's plenty of opportunities. So in Acts chapter 10, Peter is preaching, and he describes or gives just a summation of the life of Jesus. And this would be ideal for me. It'd be great if somebody defined my life like this. So this would be my desire if someone was to define my life. But he says in verse 38, he says how God anointed Jesus of Nazareth, the Holy Spirit, with power. And then it says this, he went around doing good. So he went around doing good. He went around serving. He went around loving. And it says, who did he do good to? It says, healing all those who were oppressed by the devil. Those that were hurting, those that were being spiritually afflicted, those that were, and through physical diseases. We know that there's many accounts in the Bible where Jesus would basically help people that no one in society would help. The outcasts and the people that were terrible people, they would call them sinners and tax collectors, the people that would rob and steal. Jesus was in there loving those people, and we says he had a reputation of it. He went about doing good. And so he not only lived that, but then we see what happened to him. He says, and he went, verse 39, he says he went, and we are his witnesses. So he affected his do-gooderness, affected these disciples, and they were witnesses of it. And then it says they put him to death, hanging him on the tree. You think about it, the greatest person in his reputation that he did good, that they would kill him. And so suffering comes with doing good, which doesn't really make sense, but nobody likes a do-gooder, right? Like, oh, he's always good, right? Doing always good, because we have a negative slant to that. Now, we're bad to the bone. We're like, yeah, right? We love that, right? We like that, the idea of being edgy. But you want to live edgy today, I believe, start doing good is going to be as edgy as you can get today. Just start going and just go around doing good. Go help somebody that no one wants to help. Go, try to do good, and you'll be spoken meanly about. People will say, "What's your angle?" Right? If all of a sudden if someone came to my house and started like raking my lawn, which if anybody wants to do that, like I'll let you. But if someone just randomly started doing that, there's a part of me that's like, whoa, wait, why? What do you want, right? Like, what do you want? What's the strings attached to this doing good? Well, Jesus did that, and so the Bible teaches about this doing good. So we understand that. We kind of got an idea that Jesus was that way, but the Bible teaches about how we're to do this. So I think this really hits how we're to be good, or how we're to do good. In verse 6 of Galatians chapter 10, or chapter 6, verse 10 of Galatians, he says that, so then, while you have opportunity, so the opportunity, whenever you have opportunity, let us do good to all people. Now, it's easy to be good to those that I love, but there's always that one exception, right? That one asterisk, that one person we don't really want to be good to, that we don't give enough. If you're giving sandwiches out to them, you give them the little sandwich or the sandwich with the crusty. Again, I'm probably not the only one that does that kind of stuff, right? There's some people it's very hard to be good to. It's very difficult. But he says to all people, when you have opportunity, be good to all people. And so you have to work really hard at being good to everybody, because there's always that one person that kind of fits outside of the boundaries, and you're like, yeah, okay, I'll stretch that far. And then there's that other person, and you got to stretch. But he says all people, especially to those who are of the household of faith. So we are to be good to everybody, but there's also, and this is really, it's probably easier for me to be people that are closer to me. So they've made faith steps. They're closer. They're in our church family. Once you become part of our family, you're part of our family, right? Blood gets you in, blood gets you out, right? There's an idea that there's a heart that I love each one of you, and so it's easier to be good. But there's still people within our family, just like in your own physical family, that try you. That as you get to know them, they stretch you. As you get to know them, it takes a lot of effort to lean in and to care, and then especially if it's week after week, and there's certain things they do, and again, you say, I don't have anybody like that, it's probably you, right? You're probably that person that's stretching everybody, because there's a part that we all have area, just any person with any relationship, you get to know them, you get to know me, you're going to be like, man, I like these things about Sean, but I don't like these things. You're going to just get to know me, because I feel sorry for my family and friends, that get to know me closer, because once you get to know me, it's like, okay, there's some things that I will disappoint you, because it's difficult to love those that you get to know. There's things that I should do that I don't do. There's things that I do that I shouldn't do. And so that's with all of us. But he gives us a guidance. Then he says in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 15, see that no one repays another evil for evil, but always seek after. I like that. He's like, seek after, which is good. Good for one another and for all people. Not only are we to be good to those, or take the opportunity to be good, we're to look for opportunities to be good. We're to seek opportunities for the good of all people. We're to look for things. So if you're, and again, as you grow in this, you can get good at this. Like you can be at the grocery store and you're like, oh, here, They were just talking about that, and you could pick up a loaf of bread for somebody that you know, right? There's just, once you kind of get used to doing that, looking for opportunities to help people, and really this is a good way to learn listening. You know, most people don't want to tell you what they need or what they're not going to tell you, but if you're listening, they'll tell you. They'll tell you some things about them. You'll have to walk with them a while, but they'll start to share some hurts or some things, and you can be prepared, and you can seek and look for those opportunities to be good. He says, but always, I like that, but always seek after that which is good for one another and for all people. So really, the Bible's really kind of giving us a guideline or some parameters. We're to be good to people, we're to good to all people, and then we're always to be looking for good opportunities, and then we're to do it to all people, right? So there's not exception. So we can't be good, and the way we get that is because Jesus was good to us. He's always been good to us. He had to die on the cross and died for your sins, for you to come to know him. He had to pay for your sins. So he was willing to bring you into this. And so he was willing to do that. And then I love this verse too. This is in 2 Thessalonians 3:13. We're just kind of getting a parameter of understanding who we're to be good to. Well, right now we know it's to be to all people, to especially those people that are close. We're to look for opportunities, and we're to seek out those opportunities to be good. And so we're to be good doers, right? Do-gooders, right? We're supposed to be that. Then he says in 2 Thessalonians 3:13, he says, but as for you, brethren, do not grow weary in doing good. I don't know about you, but there comes a season or times where you feel like you're wasting your efforts, right? Like you're always trying to do good. Now again, at least so from my perspective, my doing good, you know, I'm always right. I'm always the good person. I'm always going so far. Now, people are probably thinking that of me too. It's like, man, I give him good and he just wants more. And I give him good and he just wants more. But my perspective is I'm always giving good, right? We see ourselves as better than we really are. Like we're not as good as we think we are most of the time, right? We have to be honest about those areas. And I think that's a good thing. A couple things, I didn't mention this earlier, but one thing that's really helped me, if you find somebody that it's really hard to be good to, find somebody else that loves that person. So find their mom, find their dad, find somebody that really loves that person. So if there's one person you're like, man, I just do not understand. So if you can learn their story, you can find out their story. Like there was one guy that I worked with. He wasn't a great plumber, but he was a good guy. And then I began to hear his story. He was a preemie baby, him and his brother. And his brother actually died, and he survived. And then I saw him through his mom and dad's eyes. So he was prayed for. He was in the hospital for many months. And then I just started to have a heart for this guy. And then before I know it, I'm like his champion. I'm trying to help him be successful because he was somebody that they prayed for. They wanted, it just helped me. So that helps me. And then you find people that love that person and give them that opportunity to love that person. So you help them. That's just one thing that I've learned to help because you got to be honest, I think. We don't love everybody. This is a growth edge for all of us. We have to grow in this, and we have to die to self. And so I share this story just to kind of give you an idea of the difficulty. And I really believe this is hard. This is Christianity 101. This is really Christianity. Christianity isn't something you can do on your own. You need Jesus Christ. And so there's a couple guys that I went to church with that I was an associate pastor. I had a senior pastor. I was an associate pastor. And I had some new ideas of how we could revitalize the church, and we are living those ideas today. So you're like, what are these crazy ideas that just came up? We are living them out. But the church was pretty traditional, had things done a certain way, and so I was kind of rocking the boat. I was pushing the pastor, and I was really trying to reach people, lost people. We had gotten comfortable and just seeing the same people come, and so I wanted to see other people come. Well, I would share those ideas with other guys, and thinking they had the same desire that I wanted. But surprisingly, people in church are not always excited about reaching lost people, which is shocking, right? There was a time, honestly, I promise you, there was a small group I was in that one guy basically said, Sean Snyder just wants to see lost people come to church. And I thought that was like a plus. But that's not what they wanted church for. They wanted the good people, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, so those ideas and I like the people that are the farthest from God is who I want to see. And so you have to take away some of the churchy language. You have to do certain things to make them feel welcome, right? Like if you were going to a financial advisor and he started using technical things, you'd be like, well, I don't understand, right? But if you set it down to where you could understand and make your own decisions, that'd be an advisor that you'd want. That's the same way I see church. I want to speak in your terms. I want you to make your step. It's not about me making my step or me being big. So anyway, I was sharing all those things, and this happened this one week that I didn't even purposely do this. There was a need for one guy. I was willing to help him with the plumbing need. I was willing to help this other guy with I can't remember what his was, but there was another guy, they were looking for an adoption, and I had given some money for them. So I was trying to do good. And one thing that I have learned through following Jesus is it's not, when it really comes to following Jesus, there's a sacrifice to it. There's a hurt. There really, you don't get the praise of men from it. When it really comes to living for Jesus, nobody's excited for you. They really aren't. You know, and even the people that, because a lot of times when if you're doing good around people, what does that make? If someone all of a sudden started doing good, what does that make you want to do? You feel uncomfortable. So you either want that person to go away or you have to join them, right? So there's that part of that. So anyways, there came a meeting. My pastor was confronted by these guys saying that I was trying to change some things, which I was not. He was involved. Well, there was another meeting that I had my pastor confronted me. Now here, my heart was to try to do good. But they took it as evil. They said that he was trying to take it, and it threatened my pastor. So we had a meeting, and he came that close to firing me. And one of the things he wanted me to do, and I humbly did this, is he said, I want you to go back and tell those guys you're sorry. Now, I was very clear what I was sorry for. I'm not sorry for trying to reach lost people. I'm not sorry for those things. But I'm sorry for making them feel like I was trying to take over the pastor. That was never what I was trying to do. And so it got all mucky. And so what I'm sharing this for is to show you, not that I'm awesome, but that when you try to do good, like those that you're doing good don't necessarily see it as good. Like the truth was that church needed to make some changes and to reach the lost people that are in the community. God had planted them for a purpose. There was some things. And those guys, what was interesting, 3 months later, all those guys ended up leaving that church for their own reasons. And it was nothing to do with me, right? And none of them served anywhere. But they were all kind of pointing at me. So what happened though, what it taught me is to learn to be humble and learn to really, when you truly try to do good, that no one's going to be like, yay, we're so glad you're doing good. Like, my heart, honestly, was trying to, where God blessed me was, there was one guy in particular that has helped me financially with just encouragement through this whole process we moved here. He made a statement. He said something to another person one time that I happened to be there. He's like, look, I've seen Sean Snyder go through some of the hardest seasons I've ever seen somebody go through. But I saw him do good to people that didn't like him. Like he made that very clear. And I didn't coax him to say that. That was his words. And so it's hard. It gets weary. But listen, in this season and where we live today in 2020 of October, right? We've skipped 1 year. September's over. Now we're doing a year of October, right? Who knows what's coming? But listen, if you're really going to make a difference, we're going to have to be do-gooders. We're going to have to really be intentional about loving people, about going to them, about helping them. And so the Bible thankfully gives us a very clear, easy example of that in Luke chapter 10, the Good Samaritan. The Good Samaritan was, many of you know this story. Jesus is sharing it. He's telling you to love your neighbors as yourself. And they're like, who's my neighbor? So he gives this story about who his neighbor is. And so he says this guy gets beat up, robbed, and left for dead on the side of the road. And a priest and a Levite who were religious see the guy and go the other way. And they ignore the guy. Now, we would all say, those guys are great sinners, but we've all done that, right? How many of you have seen a need? You're like, ooh, don't call on me, and you go out the other way, right? There's a part of us that really don't have time. We have things to do. like, so I'll just share. I'll share. So just so you know that my do-gooding isn't really very. There's times I'm not. If somebody's up, like on the side of the road, my wife always wants to stop, and I'm like, nope. I just nope. We can help. It's like, look, there's people already there. They got a cell phone. So there's a part of me. So I'm probably like the Levite and the priest, right? But the idea behind this is the Samaritan saw the need, right? Verse 35, he says, or not Samaritan, but the Samaritan. He says, verse 33, he says this, but it's a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. So just the opportunity was for all three of them. The Samaritan actually took action he had compassion. He saw the guy. He had compassion for the guy. Now, just maybe I need to work my heart on those things, but I can't fix your car, and I don't know CPR. So it's like, you don't need me. I'll call 911 for you. But the idea is, I hope I never see you guys on the side of the road, because if I don't stop, you'll hold me accountable. Anyway, so the Samaritan sees the need, but and what do? He takes the opportunity. And this is a great point, because a lot of times we all see needs, and what do? We're like, oh, the pastor needs to know this. My Sunday school teacher needs to, or this person needs to know this. If you saw the need, who needs to react to the need? The person that saw it. And a lot of times we want to take what we see and what we have and push it on somebody else. Now, I think that is a step, but I think the first step is meet the need. I think God shows you in each one of you, and this should help you and free you from having to go through me. Because what happens is, like, I'm sitting there just waiting for you to call me and tell me what to do every day. Like, I just can't wait. So-and-so to call me and be like, oh, there's a need. Yes, there's a need. One time this guy calls me and says, hey, there's a guy that's up on the freeway that needs a place to stay. Again, that's fine. But I'm like, so what did you do? He's like, well, I left him. So, again, I understand the idea and the heart behind it. But I think the key thing we can learn is that we all have opportunity. And if we see something that moves us or gives us awareness or has compassion, we need to step up and just meet the need. Just to meet the need. He didn't go call and find out all these resources. What did he do? He took on himself. He says in verse 34, he went to him, bound up his wounds, pouring the oil and wine, and then he set him on his own animal and brought him to the inn and took care of him. So what did he do? He took on the burden of this guy. He stepped into this messy situation. He was willing to walk through it. He saw the opportunity, and he invested. He started to do good. And so when you see an opportunity to do good, what I want to free you up is you don't need anybody to stop you. You don't need permission. You don't need approval. You get to just jump in and help meet the need. Now, it's going to be messy. Maybe they don't want the need. Maybe the guy was combative. It's never easy. Like someone reminded me right after the first service was, no good deed goes unpunished, right? And so there's a part that it meant if you start doing good, there is a cost there's a ticket behind it that you don't understand. Like, it's going to cost you more time than you thought. Maybe the guy was just interested and it's like, oh, maybe he's okay. And then you realize he's in really bad shape. And now he has to invest a lot more time. And that's usually what happens. And that's why we don't do it, right? That's why we don't do it, is because we're like, I don't have the time. It's busy. Let somebody else. They have free time. Let me call so-and-so. They have nothing to do. They're a stay-at-home mom. Let them do it, right? All these stay-at-home moms are like, I'll kill you, right? But the idea is it's work. Like, it's work. It's effort. It's sacrifice. So he sees the need. He took care of the need. He was willing to go beyond. Didn't wait for permission. And then walks through, in verse 35 it says, and the next day, so he was committed. Next day, he took 2 denarii and gave it to the innkeeper. That's like a day's wages, so it cost him financially. So when we begin to talk about doing good, the effort that goes into it takes time, it takes money, it takes energy, it takes you. The guy didn't need just his money. The Samaritan invested him. He was willing to walk with the guy. And that's really where our heart is, the idea of walking with somebody. If you know I'm trying to get rid of you if I just give you money. Like, if you're like, hey, I got money, like, goodbye. Really, because money is the easiest thing I can give you. Leave me alone. leave me alone, right? That's really honestly. I feel guilty about what your situation here, leave me alone. Now, maybe some of you are like, hey, I'd like that, feel guilty about me, right? But the idea, what you really need is me. You really do. You need me. And that's what they need. When someone has a need and someone's willing to step into that need, you really don't want their money. You want them. Many times when I'm sharing about the vision of Living Hope Church, and I'm talking about our intern program, or talking about what we're doing, I tell them, I was like, look, I don't want your money. I want you. I want you to invest you into this. Because when they invest them into it, then you get all the money, you get all the resources they have, you get all the connections they have. They get us. What someone needs, they don't need Living Hope's money, they need us. Now that doesn't mean that it can come with money, but they need us. One guy one time was saying that the church had never done much for him. I was like, listen, we've done more for you than we could imagine. He's like, how? And I started naming people that had been with him. Because the greatest resource of this church is you guys. And when you give your time and you give your energy, that's what I have. And so they were willing to step into that. They were willing to help. And so that's what the Samaritan was. And he was willing to walk with them. He actually had to pick him up, put him on his animal, so he had to walk now. It was an effort and sacrifice. And so doing good costs. It costs energy. It costs time. It costs effort, right? And then so Jesus sums all that up. He says, and he basically says, at the very end, they said, so who showed mercy? It was the guy, the Samaritan. What did he do? Then Jesus says this statement. He says, you go and do likewise. And so what I truly believe that this week, you're going to see a lot of opportunities. You're going to have many opportunities to do good. The question is, will you take those opportunities? Some of them will be like the other guys. We'll pass by, hope somebody else takes care of it, right? Like me on the freeway. Hope somebody else. Right? That's just honest. Let's be honest where we are. Some of them will get into it and we're like, ooh, it's too much for me. I probably should get some other people. But I think the key of all of this is to do good where you can. So I always start where I can. I can do good at home. I can pick up the trash. I can put my laundry in the right basket, right? I can be good to the people that are closest to me. I can do good to the people in our church, right? If I know a need and I know they need something, there's many times I'll see something and I'll try to help meet those needs. But as I meet all people, as God introduces new people into my life, there's a responsibility that I want to feel. And again, it's not all the time, but I want to be a do-gooder. I want to be a guy that is known, that they say, remember Sean, if someone summed up my life, they say, you know what, that guy always went around just doing good. Just doing good. Now, it's not a busybody. It's not somebody that's like, you're trying to, virtue signal how awesome you are. It's actually somebody that's really doing good. The guy, the Samaritan, he goes and then he comes, he's like, hey, I'll repay you. I'm with this guy to the end. And then, so there's a responsibility in this, but then there's a balance. And I want to finish up right here. In Galatians 6, the Bible tells us to bear one another's burdens. So when we're doing good, our hope is to bear your burden, is to help you, is to help you. And so how do we balance that? Then it also in verse 5 of chapter 6 of Galatians says, for each will have to bear his own load. So we all have our own responsibilities that I can't. So the way I think about that is like when my son was sick and he went to the hospital, many of the church family came in and helped bear that burden. As we had to travel to Portland, as we had financial expenses, how the church stepped up and was great to us. And then when I say the church, it's you guys. We're great. You prayed, you sent texts, you helped. And some of them came and watched our kids while we were taking air. And some others, did all kinds of things for us. They took that burden and they made it lighter for us. And that's really what being known and having a church family should be. Some of you are going through some burdens, and we want to help you. We want to walk with you in those. We want to take care of it. But then there's the other side where if something was to happen where I could not walk. So I physically got in a car accident, I no longer could walk. There'd be a season the church would step in and take care of that burden. But then that burden eventually becomes our load, like becomes mine and my wife's life. And we would have to take on that. Now that balance, the church could step in, but there's a point where I have to make new adjustments and have to make some things. And I think that's what you're trying to do. When I think of doing good, is you're helping for that need, you're stepping into that space for a season, and then you're backing out hope. And real good is when they start to grow and begin to manage the new normal or whatever they're facing. And so we all have opportunities. And it's not as difficult as you think it is. And usually it's right there, and you have to walk around it to get it. And this is what I would tell you. And my wife shared this to me, and another lady had shared to her. She said once, she's like, how do you know who to do good things for, right? Because there's lots of things to do. She's like, if you ever sit there and you think, I should do this, like just randomly, like someone's name comes up, or you just feel like, I should give them a call, and I should check on them. The lady's advice was, do it right away. Because your heart is sinful and wicked and selfish, and so it's a good acknowledgement that the Holy Spirit is leading you, and an opportunity to step in and help someone encourage. So I've tried to practice that. So there'll be times, maybe many of you have gotten random phone calls by Sean Snyder, right? Usually it's because I have a hunch, just a random, like, hey, I'm going to call this guy, or I'm going to text this person, and because I want to check on how they're doing. And usually what happens to me is like 11:30 or midnight, I get that hunch, so I have to make a note at in the morning to call them, because no one appreciates a phone call that late or early, right? Or at 4 o'clock in the morning, hey, how you doing? I'm just checking on you. So the idea, though, is listen to the Holy Spirit. Let God lead you. Be known as a do-gooder. Be known. Be willing to step in this and this opportunity. Just like you're not waiting for me to find things for you to do, I'm not waiting for you to find me things to do. If God shows you something, that's an indicator that you have a great opportunity, and you can be you could help change a person's life. That guy that was on the road, laying there half dead, one day when he came to, maybe he doesn't know the guy or whatever, but he's like, man, there was a Samaritan that when I was in my greatest need, he stepped in and was just a good guy.